Hi, this is Ken McCarthy from Jazz on the Tube, and we're going to be talking with Dave Oliphant about his book, KD, A Jazz Biography. The KD in this case is Kenny Dorham, and this is a most unusual and beautiful work. I'm going to ask for the actual definition of what kind of work this is, but I can tell you it's a long poem dedicated to the art and life and recordings of the late, great Kenny Dorham, the wonderful trumpet player from Texas. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
Now, Dave, we've spoken before, and you've written quite a few books, actually, at this point on Texas jazz. Can you tell us a little bit about your other works besides KD, A Jazz Biography?
Well, my first book was Texan Jazz, which is a survey of Texans who were involved in jazz, beginning with the ragtime, blues, and boogie-woogie period with Scott Joplin in the late 1890s, coming up to around 1970 is where I left off. Before that, I had actually edited a volume of essays, scholarly essays on jazz, on bebop and jazz literature. But my first effort on my own was the Texan Jazz. Then I was invited to write a book on the early swing era, a series that was produced by Greenwood Press. After that, in 2007, I did a collection of essays and reviews that I had written over a period of years called the Jazz Mavericks of the Lone Star State. KD, of course, was something quite different. I had thought about writing a biography of Kenny Dorham, but somehow I couldn't really get myself that excited about it until I decided to write it in verse, because poetry is really my favorite genre in terms of writing. I'd written lots of poetry and quite a few poems about jazz over the years, but I'd never undertaken anything quite like this. And I just totally enjoyed it. The way the poem began was I wrote 4 lines. They fell into a quatrain pattern, and I rhymed the 4 lines. And I thought, well, I guess I'm stuck with this stanza pattern, which was quite demanding. And in addition, I realized when I was typing it on the computer, I would write it by hand and then I would transfer it to the computer. And I noticed that the lines came out almost perfectly even on the right-hand margin. So I felt that I was stuck with that as well. So I had to rhyme and then I had to make it come out even just by eyeballing it. It was quite a challenge, but really just a wonderful experience. I just wouldn't give anything for it. It still amazes me that I got through it, really. It took me a number of years, but I never gave up.
And your personal introduction to jazz as a player, as a schoolboy, was on the trumpet.
That's right. I wasn't really very good, but I love the music that I began to hear on recordings, and I did play in college with a dance band that was really quite good. In fact, I was recorded with them. I was the third chair and always the last in terms of quality of playing, but it was quite an experience, and that just added to my love of the music.
Well, there's something about picking up an instrument and trying to make sound out of it as best you can that really informs you about what it means when someone like Kenny Dorham comes along.
That's right, absolutely.
You just appreciate it a whole lot more. Now, Kenny Dorham, of course, is a Texan. Was a Texan?
Yes.
Can you tell a little bit about his background and where he's born?
He was born in a tiny little place called Post Oak. The closest town is Fairfield. It's more or less halfway between Houston and Dallas. Quite a bit of area covered there, around 300 miles or so. But it's more or less in the middle, sort of northeast Texas. But when he was, I can't remember his age exactly, 10 or 11, I think it was, he talked his parents into letting him come to Austin and live with an uncle. That's when he took up the trumpet here in Austin in school. He had played around with the piano because his sister was quite a quite a fine pianist. She was impressed with what he could do just picking up on the piano, but somehow he chose the trumpet and played in the high school band and junior high. And then he went to Wiley College in Marshall, Texas, an all-black college, and they had a terrific band there and some outstanding musicians who went on to fame on the East Coast and West Coast. So that's pretty much his background, and after a time in the Army, he ended up in New York. The rest is history.
And for people that don't know, he was Charlie Parker's trumpet.
That's right.
Filling the same shoes as Dizzy Gillespie, as Miles Davis. And if I may ask, why Kenny Dorham? What in particular inspired you to do that?
When I first heard, I had recordings of, it was actually on a Charlie Parker label, as I recall. It was a box set. They were all Parker and Kenny Dorham. And I really wasn't that impressed with him at the time, but he developed such a different style later, and that was what I began to discover and found it more and more interesting the more I heard. And then the way the poem begins, it begins in Scandinavia, because I sort of thought of the poem as an epic poem. The epic will begin in the middle of things, in Medias Res. So I heard these. There are two recordings that were done in Scandinavia. He was playing with groups there. So I decided to start there, start the poem there. And then in the next canto, I go to his boyhood and then move forward. When I heard those Scandinavian recordings, I thought, God, this guy was everywhere, and he played with everyone, and this might make a really interesting poem. So that's the way it started.
I'm going to guess, ultimately, you must have fallen in love with his music.
Oh, yes, and, the more I listened to it, and the more of it that I discovered convinced me that I was doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I've been listening to Kenny Dorham with new ears since reading KD, a jazz biography, and there's a lot there. You could spend a long time without getting to the bottom of it all. That canton, is that what it's called? A canton?
Canto.
Canto. Oh, canto.
Yeah.
I guess a canton is a state in Switzerland, so a canto. The first one you call his experience in Scandinavia, Viking in Reverse, and then the canto about his childhood, Oyo delay he hooing, or hoeing. Oh,
right.
Yeah, yodeling.
Yodeling.
Yeah.
Right.
So there are, I can't count that fast, but it looks like there's about 15 or 20 cantos.
I think it's 17. I intended to count myself. I think it's 17.
Yeah, it looks about that. And you're going to read one of them for us today.
Yes, I'd like to read the canto that's called Arriving. It sort of touches on some of the albums that indicated that he had arrived in the sense of establishing his own voice and technique and his personality in terms of his trumpet playing. I cover a number of different recordings with different groups. They all sort of represent, for me, the establishment of his personality as a great jazz trumpet player.
And of course, that's what it's all about in the jazz idiom, is finding your own voice and your own personality. And it's not just enough to be great. You have to be great and yourself.
Right. And he always was that's for sure. Arriving. Out of the chrysalis of bop and hard bop, Kay tries his wings in a 59 lower-keyed riverside flight, with blue spring dropping the temperature, reducing the heat. To a balmy April day, as he and Adderley slow it down with less of cannonballs, grandstanding sax, and in his scoring, KD offers lusher lines. His solo rises and falls in Spring is Here, not above the staff, more often into earthier tones as tubers root in a compost heap, and as purple saffron flowers from mold, the cucumbers, watermelon sweet, as bee pollen basket keeps the cycle alive, with K.D.'s septet doing the same, but minus pyrotechnics. Just tendril quick runs in his poetic's tender strain as David Amram's French horn warms the chords, and Cecil's lyrical baritone booms lighter, with cannonball rushing before, then letting go a drenching rain of reedy notes, a feeding of ears, with his kernels of gold nourish beyond the metal itself, a richer growth. No pond whose view to brim crop duster blears by chemical spray on one-time stream had flowed pristine as his alto after Cade come first, with both testing the extreme limits of their instruments they'd played. And though they've gone, still blowing yet through electric outlet, amplifier, speaker, setup of mid-range with bass and tweeter, each is breeze, a greening fruit-giving jet. Cedar Walton's piano at times Brubeckian, for like their leader, a versatile Texan. Adderley at his best on spring cannon, Kay named for him, on chases neck and neck. Was it at this session he heard the altoist yodel, la-di-odel, la-di-odel, as he said he'd heard the bird before? But first, farm folks, after sacks of bowls he pulled and weighed. Or off the range, a cowboy at end of day, back at the corral, uncinching his saddle. Yet unlike Sax, Kay's horn, not able to play the yodel of cotton and cattle. On his passion spring, he and C hand in glove, with Ken soloing down low again, yet more exploratory, a Taylor influence could be, and a cannonball deeply intense. On It Might As Well Be Spring, Kay feeling Rogers' gay, melancholy lover tune, now truly sets his indelible staccato seal on a fever season's never come too soon. In 58, having donned his teaching gown, his class on August 29, 59, goes to town in Berkshire's Lennox School music barn, woods and hills once home to Hawthorne, and Melville, too, when he wrote his epical prose. If Kay didn't know Herman's Whale, or of humpbacked inveterate composer of song, the cetacean sounds of exposer of danger above, or a call below for love, in his way taught those to students from Pete Farmer to trumpeter Don Cherry of his Ornette's The Shape of Jazz to Come. Ken sang of the Lennox mentor system when he'd come to NYC. Had there been such one-to-one instruction to show him the ropes, would have begged to be let in. As to the October 26th live Randy Weston 5-spot session, the less said the better. To a Blue Monday add its dreary weather, its charts by hospitalized Melba Liston. No time to run through a high fly first, as Hawk and Roy Haynes' flights delayed. Great tenor just warming up, yet had paid his dues, could do that piece unrehearsed. Together with Kay's horn, a gorgeous sound the two produce, but in soloing over stop-time piano chords, Ken can be heard popping clams when he too had been around. For before and after K.D.'s hooking up with Bean, another Coleman Hawkins moniker, out of a long 23 to then legendary career, the trumpeter a mainstay of saxophonists, of whatever persuasions from swing-age florid romantic to the bird's cerebral bop or the raucous, soulful roar train so popularized, with copycats taking up his gauge. Can count some 36 reed men Kay had recorded with, and wonder what other trumpeter joined so many, from Mobley, Moody, Rollins, Monteros, Heath's brother, Jim, to Land, McLean, Dolphy, Henderson, leaving out an Ernie Henry, lesser known. But Kay paired with any, gave each his best, assisted all to shine on East Coast or West. Had never met Oliver Nelson when studio called Ken to come in for the October 30th quintet date with tenor from St. Louis Mo. Had been through the big man mill with units like the Nat Tiles and Louis Belson, always sitting in an alto chair till switched to his larger axe, though this lower weapon heard to cut lyrically as that higher pitched, taking the edge off the bigger's harder bite and making it into Jack Mayer's softer, quite gentler carver, his salty dog, as on Ollie's opener, his own original jams and jellies, where KD plays his pinwheels of sound, kneading the bread but ready to lend a hand, dependable in any supporting roles, as here he sustains passion flower atmosphere of Billy Strayhorn impressionism, while tenor mixes slow and fast with reverential, in this ballad's real Ellingtonian voice, and with Kay muted, the due respectful choice. Then on Don't Stand Up, Kay's open, bright, happy tone, perfectly matching Ollie's own, a rendering of his original theme, oh so right, and his break few tenors have ever outshone. O's ostinato, a fuller showcase for a KD solo filled with an authoritative coming on, yet is equaled, and even, yes, outdone by Ollie, pours it on with his quoting and snappy tone. As for what's new, could say some more, but have gone into its loveliness heretofore. So add on Booze Blues Baby, all at home, on this funky closing tune, O's as if Shalom. With November 13th, Quiet Kenny's arrival, as on this album was just his horn, accompanied by piano, bass, and drums, Ken's trumpet now to measure up in no sense of rivalry with any had proven their worth before, but brings to bear on a song a predecessor had left his stamp upon, a KD new minted responsive mood, not a reading reinvented. The case with My Ideal, a tune the Hawk had cut in 43, and Kay had heard with body and soul from 39 the Ken's peerless talk, via fifths, tonic, bridge, a smidge of melody. But on that later piece, Ken the ones more moving, with muted tones more than stack up with a bean's lush, rhapsodic runs lacking in Kay's restraint, his passion never overdone, but with one deep-felt, poignant note, his a voluminous speech, as too a selective Flanagan piano tone, or a full chord of 5 fingers can touch and leave a catch in throat. On his own Blue Friday, Kay low and bluesy, an open horn altered as if muted, or maybe with a hand and bell, his varied sound, a casebook blues prescriptive of phase or phrase. Lovely, the only word for Kenny on Alone Together, a tune for Mayer closer to home, since Kay recalled his doing it first with Bird. Here, drops so low, hits a rock-bottom nerve. With I Had the Craziest Dream, Ken joining the ranks of voices exceptional even in a music as unique as American jazz, whose tongue speaks instant sense in pop or blues, bending his notes for their delicious blending of happy and hurt, now making his mark, yet not as Harry James in 42 had depended more on soaring high as morning's lark. Kay rather digging deeper into emotive veins, exploring the subterranean subtlety of tone in a melodic mother lode of the tune's own harmonic mind, layered with the lover's pains. And even if must doubt, those overseas troops would have sent in 43 their constant request from canal or carrier or bombardier groups. For Kay's rendition of that song, Helen Forrest sang with H.J.'s band as soldier or sailor dedicated the hit parade lyrics to a pretty nurse or the sweetheart hope still waiting to wed. Her snapshot publicity would never disperse as it did that Betty Grable iconic pinup shot of her in her bathing suit leering back so hot, with her Lloyd's insured $1 million legs, Harry married that year of nostalgia and pegs. While Ken's therapeutic lines would as well have rehabilitated limbs or wounded heart, if his light staccato soothing at a lower level, it lingers longer to lessen loss and being apart. And if not Warren Gordon's tune, Kay's Willard Robison old folks version they had asked for, again after he and Roach had played it before, in the plaintive, slow swing, impossibly hard, for those never achieving his effortless ease, a crackling, concise, unflashy, and ever sincere, cantando, telling of a corncob tale to please and relieve, to presto hope, rallentandoing fear. If in his beggar's opera gay seizes the day, sings beauties of flower despised in decay, his lyric itself, as Katie's album, has yet to fade, as true songs survive on or off of Hit Parade. Satch's 55 Mac the Knife on that A side of his first single to reach high as number 20 sold 1 million plus, and not until Hello Dolly did he hit top 10 prior to the inevitable slide. Ken's, of course, cannot confuse with Louis', whose vocal did the trick more than his horn, with its unmistakable, its irrepressible breeze, ever blows its freshness and balm so unforlorn. Letting forget for a moment a Brechtian shark lying in wait with its pearly, out-of-sight teeth, while Kay, in modulating, could dive underneath to uncover light rays piercing a heartless dark. For as with Satch and Sonny, Kenny too finding, even in such unlikely singing, the silver lining, with Rollins in 56 turning a viol's moritat from a deadly deed into his own colossal blight. On that jaunty, violent song as on the Debussy, Kay beaten to the punch by S's whimsical tenor, and would be again in 57 on a Johnny Mercer, classic meant for Ken, who outside the movie of 36, when Bing had sung its satirical lyrics, knew rhythm of the range from real stirrups, no stuntman routine of swinging on a mount and in a cloud of dust dashes right out of town. And unlike Teagarden's I'm an Old Cowhand of that same year, with lipped trombone turns, and melodious chords punching the witty words. Kay's is a sophisticated give and take, self-call and response, lyrical asking, answering dialogue, with bent, flutter-tongued, half-valved notes, conversing both with an Andy Adams log and Westminster chimes to Parliament votes, taking serious the Big Ben ring, where Jack in his vocal played up J.M.'s amusing rhymes, ranging up to date in Ford V8, not no hack, no doggies roped, got along to beef betimes, never back home, whereas Nuke on his sax trail drives with cutting honks, rawhide lash, a swingman skirts the herd to have it think it's unrestrained, fully free to graze or drink. On January 10th of 60, Kay takes over the lead, rides the point, in heading the steers to cross on solid rock, not into muddy creek at a loss of weaker stock, and to turn cattle's stampede into milling ends the run, then bedding them down on Mercer's English tune, a KD brand seared on top, converted to a hard bop hymn, an anthem to Remuda, Quirt, and the Rio Grande. And afterward, had he recorded no other cover, just as those goodnight loving and Chisholm hoofprints are bound to be followed by lover of Longhorn lore, this track on a rival album to stand ever a landmark of KD's musicianship, since it alone, if no other, will surely endure for showing clear as wagon wheel ruts his inspired breath control, his blood and guts. Yet album offers too Kay's own stage west, chased at breakneck speed as if by outlaws gang or redskin raid, and Song of Delilah's a quieter, muted Kay, with When Sonny Gets Blue showcasing Charlie Davis's baritone. Leaders' generosity become a second nature, though Wish would have done it himself alone, except for rhythm, as he did with the Mercer, and does with Lazy Afternoon, as Flanagan opens and closes with a hazy piano, just quiet enough to hear grass growing and daisies riot, as Kay mutes an unembellished melody again, and Stella by Starlight, too, on his quiet side. And then on Manny Album's funky 6 bits, Kay and Charlie totally together, everything fits, another winner from a gambler, true and tried. The same two horns hooking up in February on 11th and 12th to record jazz contemporary, 6 tunes in stereo for time, for those who dare, plus unreleased sign-off in exclusive sound extra, the label declares, pianist now Steve Kuhn, and on the first 3 out of 6 issued tunes, Jimmy Harrison as bassist, but on Horn Salute, Tonica, This Love of Mine, it's again Butch Warren and drummer Buddy Enlow, as too the month before. Kuhn's piano Kay had heard as an instructor at the Lenox August 59 for Steve, an alum who then, with Ron Brown, comped behind Ornette and Cherry on the Sphinx, an end tune of Margot Guryan, and who heard Ken telling his students to be inquisitive, to find and learn formation of every chord, and then to run its scale and break it up into what makes sense to get a rhythmic feel like land sakes alive, so top to bottom all you'll play is you. True of Ken, who'd practiced what he preached, as on his tune A Waltz, on which he madly swings from a 3/4 into 4, has alkali leached from ash for biled soap as the Granger had. Ken's breathtaking swoop Mark Riley's phrase, ringing with clarity and rich emotion, while Kuhn surprises with his tempo and feeling abruptly changed, so fully pleased. If Charlie on Barry squeaks a bit, he was not Kay's first, but his second choice, since Heath couldn't make the gig. But if Davis beneath leader's excitement level, he isn't God. Walt, with a gruffish yet tender tone on his wondrous rendering of the Thelonious mood, Monk's, i.e., a most moving solo for contemplation, Kuhn's touchingly pensive too. The whole group tight and showing a proper respect to one and all, but Kay's showstopper chorus and authentic individuality simmering Mark's word with monkish signature, and Handkerchief Corner designedly dropped as Walt brought to a boil by that Emersonian thought, and to compose his leaves from reading the poet when universe stopped. But on In Your Own Sweet Way, Charlie can't get started with Brubeck's tune covered in 56 by Miles and Train, though K.D. had not heard that earlier version with loving muted tones from Miles' hormone-pushing arrows button, the tenor's sweeping licks, unlocking melodic line without romantic's mush, yet amorous in his caressive whoosh. Kay more playful, but sticking close to theme, as Miles did, for to Kay, too, melody, the thing. Brew, by keeping away from cliches, staying fresh, and Kay said liked Barry as other extreme, to his own high notes, while Kuhn to prove adventurous here, and on K.D.'s horn salute, with its choppy, jagged military phraseology, Kenny knew, yet better, Bop's crazyology, a Benny Harris tune Bird had maybe played for Pannonica in a same hotel room where Kay rehearsed, and from there could see Hudson and Jersey Hills as whiffed perfume used in her mixed media paintings of milk, acrylic, and scotch, and doing them while Ken and the men went over his tonica, written for her as Jazz Baroness, whose Jewish guilt had taken Monk in, who phoned physician for Bird, felt his flickering beat, heard thunder clap as doctor came too late, musician gone, yet alive on walls, sound never gone. Though neither K ensemble nor solo lines seemed to recall his former bebopping boss, whose choruses had gotten by heart, signs missing it meant to revisit her day of loss. That weekend when she was looking after a ragged bird, watched TV when laughter at a juggling act on Tommy Dorsey's show broke blood loose, choked, and laid him low. Earlier in 55, at Birdland and Ross Russell's report, Bud Powell is stewed, Bird as Wells deep in his cups, as Ken, Blakey, and Mingus try to save the All-Stars date, till K.D. tucks his horn underneath an arm off to the side of the cursing legends had befriended him, but now unable to help either one of them, ill past his cure, must just move on. If cried back then or here in this nearly 3-minute gift to her, only with Butch's wistful bass, just a throb, not a sorrowing sob, no hint it miffed K.D. when Bird gave Red his place, which leaves his CD's final piece, his sui generis rendition of this love of mine, with its fetching, distinguished, just lovely tone, his charming staccato so utterly fine. And same be said for the Herald Land date of July 5th and 8th, when as a stocking mate perfectly matched to Houston-born tenor, San Diego raised, Kay and he one fitting pair, so close on their so in love, as Cole Porter's lyrics say, while Clarence Jones on bass pushes and pulses, and Ken's whole solos full of euphonious, priceless tones, as he hits every note right on the money, undergirded on piano by an Amos Trice, a Joe Peters on drums, two who not only lend ample swing, but more than suffice. With the pianist's own waltz, the second tune, a piece he entitled Triple Trouble, and on which the horns together a fecund duo sways in tune, rich grain, not stubble. On David Raxon's Slowly, the tenor is bringing out the theme of poignant love, then speeding it up for a blowing above and beyond his solid work, maybe his best. Then Kenny, still more touching, yet light in spirit, as Trice turns in a splendid solo. Of Clarence's bass chorus, a simple ditto, with horns closing so romantically right. Though on a little street in Singapore, it lacks aroma of a lotus-covered door, held in embrace by pale, perfumed hand. No temple bells in Kay, no exotica in land. But back to their habitat in OK Blues, can hear them at home with Kay's pinch tone, emotes in honor of Orrin Keep News. Here not a player would ever be benched. So KD arrived, and on December 9th at last, tenor Jimmy Heath, pianist Kenny Drew, Garrison bass, and Art Taylor drummer do another set for time, a Kern whistle blast of light-hearted showboat tunes, with all aboard steaming along to Jerry's musical, with Hammerstein lyrics based on Ferber, her 26th novel with sidemen Kay would aver, the best he had picked for any albums yet, all hanging loose, but with a surging drive, and with a refreshing vibe brings love alive, in songs Jerome had to pen with no regret. Can hear in any why Kay had wanted Heath, but most of all in Bill, when the tenorist nearly steals the show as he flips and twists and soars till Ken returns to win the wreath, with shifting tacks as in trimming of sails, for running the bow into wind, for sudden directional change, a self-conversing nails high to low, close-hauled notes, his cadenza, a trophy cup end to the tune and session, began with Why Do I Love You, telling piano, comping percussion, unpell-melling, and bass pulsing, a steady, tasty punctuation. As tenor full-throated, a K more supple, to quote Nat Hentoff's insert notes, groove alone or together, a complementary couple, married by and unto jazz, may none reprove. Oh, nobody else but me, Katie's bending of tones, Jimmy'll answer with a blending of matching bends, each filled with a feeling for love's root chords, harmonies heal. On Can't Help Loving That Man, a capacity for gentleness flows this an altering of Hentoff's phrase, with Kay's unfaltering expressive force, a lyric, emotive, caressive rush, a Mississippi pouring forth, as Williams wrote on Hernando's course, later Crane's hosannas silently below, in nearing docks the paddle wheels slow, to make believe, and a stevedore Drew, not stomping as Duke, but with keys unloading a cotton blossom not forgotten, dartingly humorous, ever fresh and new, as flawlessly K-State's still lovely theme, his nuanced shapes and shades surprising so, and as only its metal and reed can swing, Heath's tenor renews any lover's dream. then horns together on Old Man River, toting barge and lifting bale to lend relief to past injustice, yet more would deliver for here and now their firmly held belief. No self should wish being someone else, and by riding the deepest current of Kern to render its real and ideal tones and return to dock to reveal them within all selves, just as Razov's Christopher Columbus, cited by the sextant in a sailor's song, so KD would see he hadn't gone wrong to take tune and lyrics as a truer compass, pointed to the invitation soon from afar to voyage abroad with blue minor scale, bag packed to travel with a musical tale, chord in head and fingers, his guiding star. Expiring. All the breaths once taken in and then let out for words sung, notes from trumpet, those tongues staccato are emitted long for a sharp, flat, accidental, natural song. The airflow divided up in bars of duple, triple, quadruple time, the tones to vary in length and mood, observing as a pupil signatures for meter and to read the key. A life's continuum, early, middle, and late, though still 4 years from 50, when had to take work as a music store vendor and postal clerk with no record date. His cabaret card had lost, and on dialysis, union dues unpaid, membership expiring, meant no blood transfusion. All this while the girls grew up, then NYU hiring him as part-timer brought in some, and liked teaching, but its pay minimum. Had been to Austin for their Longhorn Jazz Festival, April 28 to 30, 67, performing with the Sam Houston State Band, had written for June Downbeat issue his report on that event. It's who's who, from Monk, Diz, and Blakey to outstanding fellow Texans, Arnett Cobb, Cleanhead Vinson, Jimmy Ford, Buddy Tate, Cedric Haywood, and Charles Patterson, Teddy Wilson, native hometown great, Ernie and Emilio Casades, Larry Coryell, the Bayou City-raised Illinois Jaquette, plus drum legend Joe and the modern Elvin, Unken Joneses together for one set. Of Joe wrote, had played with the ease and grace that kings are made of, art fuerte y con mucho fuego, and on part of the young white power 21-piece supporting cast, said for it and K Boss arrangements, that audience screamed. His what else shows never at a loss for drollery, as language too esteemed. Even hoped to write or to play his way to Diz's tremendous level, and for 70 K to produce indeed his so fine, too brief, modest memoir fragments, Self-Belief. The next year, or the one after, to phone Austin's University to say might relocate. He'd enjoy playing in his jazz program and helping band students to hone their skills, had plans for setting up his treatments here. D. Goodwin directing the ensemble then, and remembered this, who had arranged prior to Kay's passing his epitaph and performed that chart at Chicago's National College Jazz Festival in 72. Kay, December 5th, breathless from renal failure, had stopped a heart, a brain filled with unseen notes heard within his inner ears, then out of tubes, a gold or a silver bell with valve lubes had speeded along messenger's word, a prophetic phrase, blues or bossa beat, a chase, or a smoky tone running line, to blend with any instrument, compete with none but under the brother's sign. Cecil Payne, recalling at Kay's Brooklyn family man home, he taught him a roll and tootle on baritone. Looked sick, skin color very dry. Last seen at Jazz Mobile Studio, where all there but Kenny griping about a musician's economic state. He, quiet, just holding his horn, no hype with him, had accepted his chosen fate, had taken him from Post Oak to NYC, then Frisco, Paris, Scandinavia, Brazil, to the lyrics learned and by them to feel, to the recorded sounds he will ever be.